So what do we mean when we talk about world domination? So the way the internet works, your customers can be located anywhere across the globe. So they can access your website from anywhere. If you can get a package out to them, then automatically you're all of a sudden an international e-commerce brand. So a lot of people fall into it accidentally. But today we're going to talk about developing a strategy to sell to those customers within specific regions, because there's a number of major challenges that you can come across. So I think, Spencer, if you maybe give us some detail about what GHD do internationally.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that as an e-commerce provider, when we originally started out, being international wasn't one of our intentions. We were just going to sell to the guys in the UK, but I think that what happened is over the years that I've worked with the brand is that all of a sudden you start seeing that shipments are going international. And then, you know, how do you respond to that growth? What kind of systems, processes do you need to get involved with? And again, we're going to cover off some of those things today.
And what's really important for me, I was looking up some numbers before the presentation. I don't have any cool stats like the guy from CERN, unfortunately, but the UK is currently ranked 8th out of the top 10 e-commerce markets for growth. So that means there's 7 more countries you can sell into outside of the UK. And one of the things that we really shouldn't take for granted is the UK is the 3rd largest e-commerce market, so behind the USA and China. So we're really developed. For the size of the country, we're really well developed. And a lot of those things around infrastructure and around, you know, people's willingness to buy online, you can really take for granted.
Yeah, and I think that the UK, the great thing that you've got in the UK is that there's a huge amount of expertise and knowledge that you can build on. And because we're ranked 8th, that means there's lots of opportunity in other countries that are growing. But because we're 3rd in larger size, if you think about it, we're 3rd, and there's only 2 other places that are bigger, America and China. I mean, they're much bigger, and then there's little UK coming in at number 3. I mean, we're doing really well.
And one of the running themes for this presentation will be about putting customers first, delivering happy customers. So at Rackspace, we're very much focused on customer services, but for e-commerce brands as well, it's really important to deliver a great customer experience.
Yeah, and the Dilbert is the man here. He's saying it's about their goals. And really, the unique position that you're in as an e-commerce platform is that you can get the metrics to help find out what those goals are of your customers and what kind of experience they're having.
And when we talk about new customers and acquisition, it's also important to remember the existing customers too. So to sell to a new customer is 5 times more expensive to sell to an existing customer. So looking after customers who purchase you for the first time and really nurturing that relationship is very important, particularly around feedback and with social platforms.
Yes, and the way in which we've worked with it within GHD, we find that what we want to focus on is making sure that every person who comes onto our website has the best experience possible. And again, I would say that coming up with metrics that help you work out what that best experience is definitely going to be one of the good tools in your arsenal to bring to bear on it.
So as well as some great examples of success and the stories from Spencer today, the takeaways for today's session, we really want to help you get into the mindset to how your business can sell into other countries, and also understand some of the key problems and some of the ways you might approach solving those.
Yeah, and if you listen to it and if you've got questions at the end as well, we're more than happy to take some.
So firstly, one of the main things I've learned from speaking to all Rackspace customers who trade internationally is really about clearing their mind, starting again. Things you take for granted or you sell to UK customers don't necessarily translate into different geographies. And I think, you know, that going abroad really means you have to relearn what you've learned. And there's some very interesting stories we're going to touch on later, actually, about around this.
Yeah, and I would say that I've been amazed at the number of times that the assumptions that I have been completely wrong when I've gone into different countries where you know, you think that credit card is the big payment system in the UK, and you think you go into another country, you think that's going to be so, and it just isn't the case.
So there are going to be 3 pillars for success that we focus on in the slides coming up. The first is people, the second is process, and the third is platform. So 3 Ps, and we'll hope it be easy to remember. So the first of those is people. And what's really important is local knowledge. So understanding the market you're going into isn't just about language and translation. It's about understanding culture, social taboos, how you market to those categories as well. So it's something I think, Spencer, you can talk a little bit about how GHD developed that local knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, GHD is in a bit of an unusual situation in as much as when e-commerce launched into the different countries that we're in, we were lucky enough to already have a physical presence in those countries. So what was great for us was that we could actually reach out to those people in those local areas and get that local knowledge coming back to us. They could tell us about what worked or what didn't work in those locations, what payment systems worked, what delivery systems worked, what was normal. A great example of that was in Germany you get payment by postman, and I think we'll come up with that example a bit later on.
Yeah, and I think local knowledge as well, a really important point is doing the research, because you're not just researching product knowledge.
No, not at all.
So it's also researching what your customers want in that location. And local knowledge, I think, is something we touch on throughout the slide. So while there's a lot of individual points here, they kind of all overlap with each other. So it really is like that, a whole message. So when we talk about people as well, what's really important, and we've already mentioned putting the customer first, is customer service. So giving your customers that experience that they're used to, where they can talk to someone or get help from someone, not just in their language, but really understands them. And there are a number of different ways of doing this. So some customers build out a customer experience centre within country, and they'll have different language speakers there. Or other countries open them out into different areas, into those separate countries, and have people on the ground. So there's a number of different ways you can solve the problems of customer services.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, we were lucky enough to have customer service teams in these different locations in the 13 countries that we're actually based within. And what we found was that the UK would typically lead with a piece of technology or a service or a product. And then what we would do is we would take best practice from the UK and then try and move that over into a particular country. But again, the learnings that we had when we took that and we moved it over into the country were that best practice didn't necessarily always fit for that market. So again, the customer service, the people, it was the relationships that you have and the ability to be able to talk and learn were really paramount.
And I think next we're going to touch on returns. So, 10, 15 years ago even, people said you'd never buy shoes, you'd never buy clothes on the internet. We were all proved wrong by that, and now apparel is, the quickest growing market online. And return is really, really important about taking down customers' barriers to purchase from you. And I like to put myself in a customer's shoes when I think of this. And if I'm buying something online, and I think to myself at the back of my mind, well, what happens if something goes wrong? If I need to exchange, or if I need to change it? I'm buying from another country, and then I have to ship back to that other country. So having a solution to be able to make returns within country and make them easy for the customer is important.
Yeah, and what I would say is that as e-commerce providers, the one thing that you can never get away from is returns. It doesn't matter what you do. It could be a damaged package. It could be just distance selling that people are allowed to return them. If you remove all of those issues or concerns that an individual has, a customer has, to return the products to you, and you make that as seamless as possible so that their risk of actually making the purchase disappears because they know they can return it if they want, then you'll start to get to the point where you get customers who are quite happy to make the purchases. And that's, it's all about making people comfortable, putting them at ease, making sure that they'll come back to you because they know that you're going to give them the service that they want.
So the second pillar of success for today is around process. And I think the most important one, particularly from a business perspective, is how can you get the customers money? How can you make it easy for them to make payments to you? So in the UK, typically 85% of e-commerce transactions are done using credit and debit cards. I saw a statistic the other day that said last year we did 600 billion in the UK through cards, which is the equivalent of £19,000 per second of card transactions. So we love piling on the debt, but that isn't true in every single country. There are lots of different methods available, and I think Spencer's got a great example we touched on earlier.
Again, I think I'm going to mention Germany here. So this is payment by postman. So when we first went over to Germany, we were speaking to the German team, and my colleagues over there said, we need to take credit cards, we need to do bank transfer. I was like, okay, bank transfer, not popular in the UK, but yeah, we can do that. And then when he mentioned payment by postman, I was like, well, would you mind just explaining to me quite how payment by postman went? It was like, yeah, sure, we do it all the time. We give the package to the postman takes the package to the customer gives the postman the cash, and then we get the cash off the postman. I was like, and that's, and this is just normal. And the important thing here is that in every market I've been into subsequently, I've had an instance where I've gone, would you just mind explaining to me that, please? Because I don't quite get it. And it's not that but to them it is just day-to-day practice. That's what they do. So again, you have to lean on them for their experience.
And I think as well, it touches on the point we made earlier about barriers for purchase, making sure the customer is happy and confident that they can transact with you in the way that they're the most comfortable. So, while there's hundreds of options out there, it's important to understand which ones work for you and which ones also work for the customer.
Yeah, and in Germany, just to put it in some kind of context, credit card is just 1/4 of the payment methods that we use. We have a 1-1-1-1 split.
And I think while we're talking about cash and payments, we should probably mention tax. Now, unless you're Apple or Starbucks or Amazon and you've got some clever loophole where you can push your tax payments through another country, you're going to be faced with the issue of tax. And it is complicated. Tax rules tend to change on an annual basis. Every country has different tax rules, but I think the specific example we've got really is around the USA.
Yeah, I would say when I started doing tax and then when we went over to the USA and we started looking at the USA tax situation, I was somewhat flabbergasted. In the UK, it's, sales tax, quite easy, 20%. There's different taxes for different types of products, but more often than not, you're talking 20%. So you go over to the US, you think, sales tax, there might be a different sales tax in each state. Not quite. In California, and I checked it this morning, there's over 200 tax areas. So what you have to be able to do is take a customer's order, work out which tax zone that particular thing is, and it goes down to the city or the municipal area that it actually applies to, and then you've got to be able to do tax returns on it. Now, we used to do that all internally, but now we work using our technology partner. We've partnered with our PSP, and we actually let them do the tax calculations for us. So, the thing is, if you go out there are solutions that you can call upon.
And I think that's a good point and worth emphasising that if you're going to sell into a foreign country, if you're going to do this abroad, there are third parties and partners who you can work with to deliver different parts of the service. And while you might not work with them for the duration of the project, you can learn from those people, learn who've solved the problem before. And like in GHD's case, where they use a third party for tax because it's a specifically complicated problem.
Yeah.
And I think partners brings us quite nicely onto the problem of distribution, how you get packages out to your customers and the different methods of doing that. Particularly in foreign countries, with the scale of countries like the USA, countries like Australia, they don't have the same infrastructure that we have in the UK, so it's much more of a challenge. And Amazon have set the bar ridiculously high with their Prime service, which offers free next day delivery, and that is really what customers expect now. My girlfriend just the other week was shopping online and it was a 5-day delivery time. She said, I'll just go and find it on Amazon. I'm not going to buy that. So, customers' expectations have been reset by Amazon. And it's a real problem delivering that.
And delivering that internationally. Again, I would say, it's interesting you mentioned Australia, because in Australia you can't do global next day delivery. It's not like in the UK where the Outer Hebrides is like the furthest point. In Australia, it's over a whole continent. So delivery can be, next day within the local area on the East Coast. But if you want to deliver to something on the West Coast, then you've got to allow 7 days. And then we have aerosol products as well, and they can't fly. So then it's got to be land shipped. So not only do you need to know what your products are, you have to have a little bit of thought about what country you're selling into and what their geographical constituencies are. If you have to deliver products over the Alps, then you might have to add another day for delivery because it takes the time to get the materials over there, or the Pyrenees.
And I think as well, we touched on payments where there were lots of different methods. For shipping, there are lots of different methods as well. So in the UK now, you can get delivery to a box that you can collect later. You can even get delivered. There's a company that does on mainline stations. So either end of your commute, you can pick up the package that you want to have delivered. So I think understanding what customers want and making it easy for them is key as well.
Yeah, and monitoring what it is that they like. So we've put different payment options and delivery options in on the website. And what we'll do is we'll see how they work, see what the response to the customers are, whether or not they're taking it up, and monitor the performance of those delivery methods as well, or any of the technology that we put in play, to then review that, work out what's working, and then see what other companies are doing. Are we going to do drone deliveries for emergency hair products for customers? I mean, you'd be surprised at the things that we get asked for.
And I think that leads us on to the third P of today, which is platform. And performance is really the underpinning story for all e-commerce websites. So a fast loading website means a much better customer experience, which leads to a higher rate of conversions. And there's been plenty of studies done online about reducing page load time and increases in conversion of customers. I know performance is particularly important to GHD.
Yeah, we've been working for all of the stuff we do is performance related. We're interested in the hardware performance, software performance, our performance as well, how that works. And again, I would say that the metrics that you put in place, that you measure it by, really is that starting point for you to be able to make improvements. We did a replatforming piece of work about a year ago or so, and we halved the time of the server response time, which is a huge, it's only a 200 milliseconds improvement, but that is huge when you consider how that aggregates over time. And if you can start making, doing performance budgets and start making incremental improvements on what you have in place, then you can see some really big returns on those investments.
And tying the performance piece back into international, in the ideal world, you would deploy servers in every country, reduce the latency and be serving those pages as close to your customers as you can get. But in reality, it's not really feasible. A, it's very expensive. B, there isn't always the infrastructure available. And C, it makes business very difficult doing database replications if you want to do things like real-time stock levels and things like that. So understanding and measuring the response times within country and using technologies such as content delivery, so CDN platforms to be able to accelerate content to closer to your customers is really important. I think that's something that you do at GHD.
Yeah, we use CDNs very successfully. But again, we don't just implement these types of technology. We implement them and then we test in country. So we're quite keen to make sure that we evaluate the performance that real people would see. So not only synthetic testing, but real testing where we would get people to actually test the performance, or we might use, again, a third party to go in country to work out what kind of performance we're seeing in Australia or in South Africa.
And so another common e-commerce problem is understanding peaks. And there are really three kinds of peaks to focus on when you talk about the problem. It's first of all, it's seasonal peaks like Black Friday, Christmas, or a summer sale. There are also the managed peaks where you've driven traffic specifically to the website. So maybe you've run a marketing event, maybe you've done an email, maybe you're running a set of TV adverts, something where you've driven traffic to the site. And then third, there's the unplanned or unexpected peak. Maybe a marketing campaign has gone viral, or perhaps you've had a celebrity mention on social network and you're getting an unexpected amount of traffic coming to the site. So those are all common issues you need to be aware of for a regular e-commerce site. But when you do that internationally, you have to be aware of how peaks are affected in other countries. And probably the best example of that is in China. So in China, they have a seasonal peak called Singles Day, which is the 11th of November. So 4 ones as the representing Singles Day. Has people here heard about Singles Day? It's not very common in the West, but it started in 2009 as an anti-Valentine's Day message. A bunch of students came up with this idea that on Singles Day, you would go out, if you were single, and buy yourself something really cool. And you'd go and do it on the internet, and it started off with a bunch of students, and then Alibaba, the huge selling platform in China, trademarked the day and started to publicize it and advertise it. And it's got so big. In 2014, Alibaba turned over $9.2 billion on Singles Day alone. And the first $1 billion of that revenue happened within 9 minutes. And one of the most staggering stats I heard of it, they sold 50,000 cars through their internet platform on the Singles Day. 50,000 cars. So the scale of it is much bigger than anything we see, around Christmas or Boxing Day or Black Friday. So, understanding those cultural peaks, I think, is important.
Yeah, and again, the monitoring is the really key point on this. And an example would be, and one that I would say regularly happens to us, is we will see demands for our products based on marketing activity that we do. And let's say we can ship 200 products a day through our distribution channel. So if we see that the distribution need in a particular day is going to go over a particular performance metric, then what we do is we know that we need to phone up our distributor to book in additional shipping capacity. And this is all down to being able to set the peaks that you understand and that you can manage, and then being able to have little red flags that fly off that say, hey, you've already sold 150 items today, it's only midday, you're easily going to double that and sell 300. You need to make sure that you've got extra distribution capacity for later on. And that's a real example of what we need to do within ours.
And then the last point we've got is around mobile. And I don't think any e-commerce presentation would be complete without a slide on mobile these days. 2014 was officially the tipping point for mobile. So not only did people visit your site for the first time on a smartphone or a tablet as opposed to a laptop or a desktop, but they actually bought more. So more than 50% of people made a purchase through a smartphone or a tablet. And so the mobile revolution really is upon us now. So Spencer, maybe you can tell us what you're doing at GHD around mobile and maybe the history of how you've grown up with the mobile platform.
Yeah, we re-platformed about 4 years ago. And when we did it, mobile was big, but typically the way that people did it is you had a desktop website and you redirected people. I think you might remember this. You redirected people to a mobile site and the two were split. And that's all fine, but what we did was we just made sure that the desktop site worked on a mobile phone. But the problem was that it wasn't mobile optimized, or was not as optimized as we could have made it. So about 2 years ago, we designed and implemented a mobile, an adaptive website. And since then, we've seen a huge increase in the number of mobile sales that we've made. We've seen a huge increase in the number of transactions that go on that mobile platform. And we're going to continue to invest in that kind of area. And like I said, we've had a lot of work over the last 2 years on performance to make sure that the website works as well as possible for all platforms.
Yeah, and I think tying that into the international message is really important as well, particularly developing nations like in China, in India. People are experiencing the internet for the first time through mobile devices. So they've never had a laptop or a desktop experience. They don't know what it's like.
They can just jump over that part of the journey.
And I think a lot of people now are starting to design where in the past they looked at a laptop or a desktop site that would respond to fit a smaller display. Mobile first is actually a strategy that people are developing and working on now. So you design with the mobile in mind that then resizes to fit to a larger display. Is that something on the roadmap?
And I think that all of us e-com providers in here will be thinking, at some point you will have to do a mobile first website. I mean, it makes sense to do that. It's definitely on our roadmap to include that. I think that there are a number of advantages of thinking mobile first. The fact is that if you do a mobile first website, the content's going to load down much more quickly, and then it will elegantly upgrade to fit the bandwidth and the experience of the device that website is actually being viewed on. So really speaking, if you just followed even performance as your mantra, you're going to end up with a mobile first website because it will be the optimal way to actually deliver the site to the consumer. So,
as the takeaways, we encourage you to remember the P's. People, process, and platform. And the message we started off with as well about having the flexibility to relearn things and really almost start again and learn new lessons, I think is something that's very important. And you will make mistakes.
We all make mistakes. I mean, I think I'll be very honest and say that I've learned a lot from the people I've worked with, an incredible amount, and I'm very honoured to work with the kind of guys who I work with. And what you have to be open to is to be able to say that, hey, that thing that I thought is wrong. You have to be able to switch to a new tact. You have to be able to be receptive to those ideas, because the truth of it is, as I've gone out into all of these international markets, I've never ceased to be amazed at how wrong my assumptions have been. And if there's one thing to take away from this is, every day is a school day. Every day you can go and learn something new from these people that you're going to build relationships with. And you can enjoy that as well. It doesn't have to be work. It can be, you can have a good time doing it at the same time.
Well, you get to go and visit lots of new exciting countries.
Yeah, and you get to go and visit lots of exciting countries as well when you're an international e-commerce person.
And I think the last point we want to make is don't be put off by all this. We've talked about a number of points today, some real complex issues around tax and distribution. Really, we're not going to solve the problems in a presentation like this, but more just to make you aware of what they might be and what some of the issues are. But I think, like you said, Spencer, it's a great opportunity. There's plenty of growth.
It is
potential,
and there's lots of people out there who have huge amounts of experience and lots of good ideas. And really, it's those partnerships and the relationships and meeting up with people like Rackspace or Tacit Knowledge, who are our development company. It's having those relationships with those people that really push products along and enable you to deliver the great solutions.
So thank you very much, everyone. That's our presentation today. I'd like to especially thank Spencer for representing GHD, one of our great customers. Thank you very much. I think the popularity of Bitcoin is up and down. I think the issue at the moment is it's still very immature, so it really changes. I saw a presentation at Ecommerce Expo in October by a third party who allows customers to put Bitcoin as a method of payment on their site, and they just do the transaction. So actually, as a vendor, you don't have to store Bitcoin or ever really worry about it. For me, you're then giving another option that people can pay by and taking away a barrier for that payment. Whether it's something that's here to stay or not, I think it's probably still too early to say. If you go on if you Google around a bit, there are some great stats about increased conversions by using Bitcoin, and I think removing those barriers to purchase is always important. But you probably want to limit the number of options. You probably don't want to have an infinite number of payment options.
I mean, for me, as GHD, I would say that it's probably not relevant as yet. But me as a techie geek, I'm fascinated by it. And what I would say I've noticed is that there's a lot of security-related websites that I visit that offer it as a payment method for security reasons, so that you can be anonymous. So I think that it's one of those niche markets that's going to stay.
In the past, I've worked with a CDN provider called CD Networks. So they were founded in that geography, and they have 21 physical POPs in China. So they have a great story around helping accelerate content into China, and they'll actually work with the Chinese government because you have to get some special permits signed, to say that the content that you're delivering is meets regulation. So that they do take some of the pain out of that. I think from our perspective, for infrastructure, we're in Hong Kong, which is close, but you're right. China's so big. I don't know if there's any real simple answer to that question. Content acceleration really is one thing, but you can't beat an in-country presence. But I know there are some hosting companies who work out of China, but I haven't really worked with any in the past. I don't know if you've got Chinese experience.
I've got some direct experience I can actually tell you about. We don't have a presence in China as yet, but as a side project, we started looking at it late last year as what would be required if we wanted to move into China. And what I would say is that it isn't easy at all. To give you some kind of an indication, when we began looking at it, If we wanted to use a CDN, they were going to charge us around about £1,800 a month. This was at the beginning of the year. They were going to charge us £1,800 a month to actually have our CDN available behind the Chinese firewall. 3 months later, there was no charge. That's how fast this kind of market in China is going. One of the other things is you're looking at least a 6-month-ish lead time to be able to operate in China, because you have to have a physical presence with employees in China to actually operate there. And you would then have to have hosting materials behind it. So I think it's one of those marketplaces to watch. But yeah, it's not easy. We're lucky enough to have a customer service team in each region who can help with that, and we also spend a lot of time monitoring that performance. I mean, and that's really the critical thing, to actually see what the consumption is, because as you go from country to country, the usage of the website and the way in which they do it, the split between mobile, tablet and desktop is hugely different. So really, what I would suggest is have an idea of what it is you want to achieve, set some kind of metrics, measurements that you can do, and then monitor it, and then see how that works. And really, the great thing about e-commerce is you can actually generate the statistics that are going to help you do this kind of work. So that's the real secret weapon in your arsenal. Well, that's really easy. We're based and hosted out of LN3 at Rackspace in London, and we then use acceleration technology to deliver it globally. And that's working really well for us at the moment. We can't, like I say, the numbers are the king. We monitor what's happening. We're monitoring all around the world to see what the performance of the web pages are in those areas. I think that we would evaluate whether or not we needed to have actual physical presences in the country as our traffic grew. But yeah, it's an interesting.
Code bases in London.
Yep, and then seriously accelerated throughout the globe. And then, like I said, we've spent the best part of 2 years diving as deep as we can, using products like New Relic as well to get down, find out how we can eke as much performance out of what we've got.